Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining me tonight. I hope that you are having a wonderful Sunday. You're fed and watered, ready to kick some butt at work tomorrow. I'm here to talk to you tonight about my novel and why I wrote it. I wrote this novel. I started it when I was still working up in Westlock. I got this little computer, almost like just a word processor, for use at home because I didn't have a computer at home at the time. Because I was on my computer so much at work, I thought it would be good to not have one. But I wanted one at home so that I could write. And so I got this little computer and I started just writing. I just felt like writing again, and I started writing stories about playing hockey, about women I knew, about fishing. So I was a little homesick for the mountains because I was living, it was about a 7-hour drive from Westlock to Invermere. I wasn't getting out to the mountains as much. So I started reminiscing about all those times, fly fishing, spending time with my friends at the lake, spending time with my dad, my family in town. And I just started writing. And I didn't have a whole lot of time to write because I was working a lot. And I had other stuff on the go. I was speed skating and playing slow pitch, and sometimes I was curling and playing hockey. So when I left my job in Westlock, I finally had the time, and I said, listen, I'm sort of back in Calgary looking for a job. Let's take this opportunity to write, because I don't know when I'm ever going to have this sort of time again. As I said, I was sort of just looking for a job. You're going to the odd interview and doing resumes and all that sort of stuff, just waiting for that to work out and seeing what's happening and all this stuff. And I also did some pretty good travel before that. Went down to California, went to Wyoming, did a big trip through the interior of BC. And then I was sort of had in the fall of that year, that was 2014, I had a bunch of time to really commit to writing and editing and figuring out some sort of a structure to the novel, which I did. I actually did cue cards, which are sort of scenes, so I sort of developed something of a narrative arc to it. Not too much of a narrative arc, because I just didn't want it to be, going from point A to point B, but I wanted there to be some structure so that it didn't feel too off kilter or too thrown together. I wanted it to make a certain amount of sense. And, when I talk about this, I know that, in literary fiction, there is sort of a trend towards being mysterious, and, sort of the established position these days is that literary writers don't talk about the meaning of their work or motivation in certain terms. They tend to say, well, I want to see what other people will bring to the book, and I want to put this out there, and I'm not really taking sides, and I want to leave a certain amount of mystery, and I don't want to give it away, because as soon as people kind of decode it, then the work of art at some level is devalued. And I guess I should start by saying, I think that the closest thing to any sort of, if you wanted to categorize this novel, it would be literary fiction, for what that's worth. And I mean, that's sort of, does that mean it's there's all sorts of, I guess, negative associations that can come from that, in terms of, does that mean it's unreadable or only to be read by postgrads who know Old Norse and other weird obscure languages and don't get out that much? No. But it just, it's not a genre fiction thing like science fiction. It's not Popular pulp fiction like Tom Clancy. It doesn't really have a mystery theme or anything. It doesn't really fit into any other categories. I think literary fiction is as close as it gets to anything, and there's a whole bunch of weird abstract things in the novel that probably earmark it as literary fiction at some level. For instance, one chapter is narrated by a mountain that's very important to me, a mountain that I meditated on quite a bit through the years. Still do. It's sort of my go-to meditation, and I could talk about that at greater length someday. But, so it's probably literary fiction, but I wanted to make something that I wanted to read. Maybe people like me would want to read, like my brother or my dad, or other people who probably, on some superficial level, are like similar to us, probably a novel that has quite a bit of fly fishing in it is going to appeal to people who live where there's fly fishing, just like I loved River Runs Through It by Norman MacLean. And he grew up not that far from here as the crow flies down in Montana, sort of a similar milieu. I understand that novel well for that reason, which isn't to say that that novel hasn't gone around the world and appeals to all sorts of people, but I think that there is a little something extra to having lived close to those areas and having some sort of understanding of the rivers and fly fishing, and definitely of the fish and the sort of people who live in these sorts of areas. So, but I had decided that here I was, looking for a job, lots of time, no money to speak of, no position that I was worried about getting at a university or keeping at a university or trying to impress people, no realistic even desire to publish it, or I flatter myself to think that that's even possible, especially in this day and age of self-publishing. Sort of the traditional idea of writers sending in a manuscript to Farrar, Straus and Giroux or something and getting it picked up just feels dead to me. It doesn't happen all that much. My cousin is actually a novelist who does have a book deal with a bigger publisher, and he works essentially in creative writing in England, or in Wales I should say, and that worked for him. I'm on a very different road, where I'm a lawyer who is a home gamer, a weekend warrior at this stuff, and really had no concept of submitting it anywhere. Was just writing for my own pleasure, and I guess maybe there's an element of proving it to myself that I could complete this thing. Ever since I was a young kid, I was really, really into writing and reading, and I always wanted to be a writer. I sort of did get sidetracked and became a lawyer, and I think that's a better fit for me ultimately, especially in this day and age where the novel is sort of on life support or a shadow of what it once was on the global cultural scene. Which isn't to say it isn't worthwhile to read or to do. It is, and it always will be at some level, but it doesn't hold the appeal or the dollars that it once did. And so ultimately I got to this position where I only had one person to impress and to please, and that was me. And if I impressed anybody else, or if anybody else in the whole damn world read it, that's just a bonus. As it happens, a friend of mine did read this book. I've sold one copy to a person other than myself. And my friend is a novelist, and he liked it. He liked it. Essentially, he said to me, I like it. There's no bullshit in this novel. I'm not talking about literary trends. I'm not writing to please CanLit people or reviewers or anything. Just wrote this novel about fun, cool things. And there you have it. So I'm batting 1,000 because I liked it and my friend liked it. And so if anyone else likes it, let me know. So what I did do, so I wrote this novel and I worked on it, edited it, made the changes. And then what I did was I just left it because I felt like I had achieved my goal. And I wrote actually a blog post about this called "The Novel I Left in the Drawer" or the Shelf, about the reason that I did that. And I think that behind that, as I thought about this for years, there's an element of, in our society, of oversharing, in which this is included because I'm bearing my soul to here. There's a value to keeping some things to yourself and keeping some things private. And then the novel that I wrote was in that category for a few years. And, at the time I wasn't on Facebook and I wasn't on Twitter. But what I did was, over the years, I got onto Twitter. I started sharing stuff, started writing in a blog about all sorts of weird and wonderful things, sharing that with people. And some of the stuff hit a chord with people. None of it really went viral or was read by millions of people or turned into books. But I did make connections with people who I knew, people who I know now, and people who I know better through the writing. And that was something that really means a lot to me. Even if it's just a handful of people, just to be able to make that connection in this world where people are, you don't really sit in the backyard and just talk with your neighbor anymore, do you? Remember, my dad used to do that always. He'd sit and talk with Mr. Lang, and they'd sit on this swing chair thing he had out back and have a beer and talk about whatever to talk about. And his son, they were quite a bit older than me, he would play road hockey on the street with two guys who lived across the street from us. They were teenagers at the time. So being able to connect like that really was interesting to me. And so what I started to do on my blog was started to publish the book chapter by chapter, one chapter a week. And a few people read it. I don't know if anyone read it straight through because I could just see that people were viewing it. I forget if I got any comments on that. My brother was sort of reading it. But anyways, it was out there and it felt good to get it out there. So what I did was I went to Amazon and I decided to publish it for Kindle, which was really an easy, incredible process, and just sort of explore what that process was about. So I did do that. And so you can buy it on Kindle. I haven't even really told anyone about this. My one friend sort of sniffed it out through my Goodreads page. And, like I've said, I never really sought an audience for this. I never really sought to promote it. This is the most I've done to promote it, which is not even really promoting it. Like, should I put a link to the novel in the description? Sure. Buy it. I'll get a few dollars, and hopefully you will enjoy it, and we can kind of connect on that basis. I guess it's out there. People may as well read it. So I guess, back to why I wrote it. I'd always sort of had this dream of being a novelist, and, I will say there was a weird year I had in my life when I was in grade 7 where I basically dropped out of school. I kind of ran away a few times, never that far, but I just had a really rough year. I had this weird epilepsy that was associated with growth, and it just creeped me out, and the whole puberty thing creeped me out, and nothing was working out for me, and I wound up being homeschooled. But that year I had a lot of time on my own, and I was probably what you would call clinically depressed or something to that effect. But what I did do was I got into this. I don't even know how I found this book. And it's not truly a novel, but in some ways, depends what way you're holding your head at. It's a book of short stories by W.P. Kinsella, Canadian author. from Alberta, actually. Again, sort of why I connect with Norm Maclean, why I connect with W.B. Kinsella. It's just a sort of a natural thing of connecting with people who write about where you live and the things that you know about, or maybe you know about the edge of them, and they know about, you know about Calgary, they know about Wetaskiwin, they know about northern Alberta, they know about Bozeman or wherever, the Big Blackfoot in Montana. So I really, really connected with this book, Brother Frank's Gospel Hour by W.P. Kinsella, and I read it over and over and over, and that book saved me. It taught me that it was okay to kind of be turning into an adult, and that this is just an incredibly beautiful book, and very, very special and personal to me. I recommend you take a look at it. You won't be sorry. That's a guarantee. If you're sorry, you come to me, I'll make it up to you. Okay? Because you won't be sorry. Yeah. So I always sort of wanted to do it. I never had the time. Finally had the time. I sat down and did it, and I said, there's no rules here. I'm going to write what I want to write, which is roughly what I want to read. And I did just that. Simple. I didn't have to impress anybody. I didn't think of anybody as being an explicit model or try and make it have an aspect of such and such or be in the tradition of so and so. I just wrote it. And it is fiction. But I mean, let's face it, we all crib. Anyone who's ever written anything cribs from real life, their lived experience into their fiction. So some people, if you read this, you're going to say, oh, I remember that day or whatever. And sometimes you're going to say, where the hell did that come from? That doesn't sound like you. That's because it's fiction. I mean, some of it, like I said, is written from the point of view of a mountain. How much more fictional do you get than that? Or it's written where they're telling a ghost story. And that ghost story is totally fiction. It's sort of an updating of the ghost stories that we used to tell at a lake with our extended family and whatnot. So, yeah, and so I guess I just wanted to do it. I just did it. And another thing about me, it's this weird thing where I should put this like politely as possible, I suppose. I always just sort of had the feeling that you have to do things and see them through. And I can't say, I'm not a perfect human being, and there are things that I did not see through in my life, as I'm sure there are in yours. But a novel is one of those things that there's nothing stopping you from seeing it through. So see it through. If you really have that passion to do it, just do it. And you can't do it by reading about it and saying you're going to do it and telling everybody you're going to do it. You just got to do it. And that's what I did, and I did it. I feel good about that. I urge you, if there's something like that, like if you want to make a comic book, if you want to make a movie, if you want to try and learn to weld, if you want to try and ask a girl out, if you want to try and have kids, if you want to try and make a fruit orchard, give it a shot. And sure, yeah, you do got to read books and study and get a mentor and all these sorts of things is helpful to one degree or another in these pathways, but at some level you just got to do it. And that's a beautiful thing about the novel as an art form, is that you can do it incredibly cheaply with total creative control vested in one person. That's you, and that's me. Okay? It's not a movie where if you look at the Avengers movie, how many people had a piece of that movie? Man, I couldn't even, look at the credits. I bet it's into the thousands by the time those credits roll. I have a little chunk of whatever they're doing in terms of digital graphics. The cast is huge. There's directors, producers, cinematographers, people creating graphics, all that stuff. So, what happens to your vision? Can it come through? Even if it can, and I think the Russo brothers are pretty good, it still costs $400 million. Okay. Whereas my novel cost my time, a little bit of, if you wanted to chalk up the cost of a computer to it, good. Let's say it cost printing it out so I could edit it by hand. Let's say that would cost $50 just to make it fun. And if you wanted to throw the computer in, let's call it $150. You can make your own piece of art that's as expansive potentially as a movie, or much more so, for next to nothing. It's another thing that really appealed to me about the form of the novel. And there's no rules. You can do whatever the hell you want. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Don't you get how beautiful that is? That's one thing, yeah, people, you look at the cultural landscape, now we have Netflix TV, we have all this stuff on YouTube, we have regular network TV, we have movies, we have sports, we do have novels still, we have comic books, we have all sorts of weird art, and the novel has less oxygen than ever before. But the novel is still superior for that reason. It's the lowest tech, the cheapest form, the freest form of expression out there, period. It has been for quite a while, and that's why it's been the center of cultural conversation for 500 years. That might be adding on a few hundred, definitely a few hundred years, okay, till recently. And so I guess when I get down to some of the themes that I want to write about in the novel, I'll go ahead and in continuing on the theme of just fully disclosing these things so that there's no mystery, I'll talk about some of the things I wanted to talk about in the novel. And I'll just lay it out there. All the cards are on the table. So, you'll note there's a scene about playing shinny, and hockey is sort of central to it. This has to do with my idea of masculinity, especially when I was younger, and sort of how it evolved. When I was a kid, status for me, for men, was all about how good you were at hockey. And that sounds dumb now, but that's what it was. And obviously I've grown out of that, as you inevitably do. But if you ask 8-year-old me, if it was like who had the pecking order in our class, the guys who didn't even play hockey didn't even rate. And then it was how good you were. And then they expanded out into school. Guys who played soccer, I didn't give a shit. Guys who played soccer were above people who weren't good athletes at all. Like if you were not into hockey, not into soccer, not into any sports, not good at sports, then you were like a nobody to me when I was in elementary school. And that was how the pecking order of our whole class was set up, was how good you were at soccer. In my own head, it was about how good you were at hockey. That's how I looked at people around me. And, I mean, in some respects, that is, as I say this out loud, sort of a microcosm of Canadian society. We pay hockey players millions and millions, like some of them get, I think, almost $10 million a season, to play a game. And if you get right down to it, if you wanted to do some testing, they're not really that good of athletes. They're pretty good athletes. They're not Usain Bolt. They're not Olympic sprinters or gymnasts or weightlifters. They play a game. I mean, let's face it, they go to the bar after. Their nutrition is getting better, I guess, but not where triathletes is. So, in Canada, that is how you get status. You can make $10 million, not even be that great of an athlete, if you can put the puck in the net. If you have that skill, or if you can grind or hit or play your role on the biggest stage, you're made. So that's one theme I sort of wanted to explore. Another theme I did want to explore was sort of this idea of creating like a Western myth. Just because I feel like out west here, we do sort of have a culture which we share more with, say, Montana than like with Quebec or even with Vancouver. So that's why I have this weird Goatman story in there. We used to have these rough Goatman or Sasquatch or sort of Wolfman, something Mossman even we had. Weird tales about guys who got hurt in the woods. We'd tell them out in the mountains or on a campfire and freak each other out. So what I wanted to do is take sort of the basic campfire story and crank it up a few notches and make it way, way, way weirder. So that's what I did there. And I wanted to make it sort of as a process of developing like almost a sense of myth or Western Canada as our society essentially develops and becomes its own society, a place where we like rodeo, we like hockey, we like fly fishing, all this, that, the other. We don't speak French. You know, generally, there's sort of a bit of derision, just mostly good nature towards people from Toronto or something, right? We sort of got our own thing going here. I mean, if you look at Canada, think about it. Who do I have more in common with? A guy in Montana who likes going to the mountains, probably works in some sort of resource industry, and likes hiking and fly fishing, or somebody in Quebec speaks French, enjoys going to restaurants, doesn't give a shit about oil and gas, even though he likes to use it, and does their own thing, and they have more in common with Quebecers in northern Maine or even people in New York than with us, right? So that's what that aspect of the novel is about. Anyways, that's why I wrote the novel. If you've made it this far, maybe I will put a link in the description. Either I'll put a link in the description, or please Google it. It's on Amazon Kindle. It's called Children of the Rockies. It's by me, Sean Vanderley. Give it a read. And let me know what you think about it, because I'd be eager to hear about it. As I said, I'm batting 1,000 of people liking it and thinking it was interesting. So I hope you do too. And I hope you pick it up, and I hope you give it a read. I hope you like it. I hope we can connect about it. I'll leave you with that. Enjoy your Sunday, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks for watching.